The clock on the wall struck 8 p.m. The hotel lobby, with its crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors, was bustling with guests coming and going. The atmosphere exuded wealth and exclusivity, a place where every detail screamed sophistication. Amid the bustle, an elderly man walked through the glass doors. He was black, dressed in an elegant yet understated suit, and carried a small suitcase that seemed more like a faithful companion than a simple accessory. His steps were slow, firm, but his weary eyes betrayed a lifetime of challenges. He walked to the reception desk with a half-smile on his face, perhaps expecting a smooth stay. Before he could even speak, the receptionist, a young man in a tailored suit with an air of superiority, gave him a disdainful look. His eyes scanned him from head to toe, barely concealing his contempt. "May I help you?" he asked, his tone more of a barrier than an offer of service. The elderly man replied calmly, "I have a reservation, under the name Samuel." The receptionist rolled his eyes, as if he had seen such mistakes before. "We have no reservation for you, sir. You must be in the wrong place." His voice was cold and unyielding. Samuel maintained his composure, explaining that he was there for an important meeting and that he was expected. But every word fell on deaf ears. Other staff members, drawn by the rising tension in the conversation, began to gather. Snickers, sidelong glances. The hostility was unmistakable, even without words. When Samuel insisted again, the receptionist lost patience. "I've already told you, sir, there is no reservation. If you don't leave on your own, we'll have security escort you out." The words hung in the air, full of menace. The atmosphere grew tenser. Some guests watched curiously, while others looked away, pretending not to notice. Samuel took a deep breath, as if trying to ward off the humiliation welling up inside him. "Please, just check again." That's when two security guards appeared. Tall, expressionless. One of them, without ceremony, placed a hand on Samuel's arm. "Come on, sir. You need to leave." The elderly man remained firm. "I just want to be heard." But it was like speaking to a wall of concrete. He felt the rough hands on his arm, forcing him out. Samuel's eyes swept over the lobby as he was led outside. The dazzling lights, the murmuring of people, everything seemed to blur into a cruel contrast. Deep down, he knew this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and he knew it probably wouldn't be the last. The heavy glass door closed behind Samuel with a hollow thud, momentarily muting the sounds from inside the lobby. Outside, the night air was cool, but the burning humiliation inside him was far from extinguished. The two security guards still held his arm, ready to react to any resistance. But there was none. He neither screamed nor struggled. He simply observed, with a mix of resignation and exhaustion, as passers-by cast glances that ranged from curiosity to indifference. "You can let go now," said Samuel, his voice steady. The guards hesitated, then released him, stepping back with expressions that barely concealed their disdain. Samuel straightened his clothes, took a deep breath, and lifted his head. Through the glass doors, people inside the lobby continued to stare, as if he were a spectacle for their amusement. At that moment, a well-dressed young couple approached, noticing the situation. They moved closer, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" The woman, with intense eyes and chestnut hair, looked at Samuel with clear worry. Her partner shared her troubled expression. "What it seems," one of the guards replied gruffly, "is that we're handling a misunderstanding." His tone suggested the matter was closed, but the couple did not back down. "A misunderstanding?" The woman's eyebrows shot up, clearly incredulous. "Because from where we're standing, it looks like you're treating an elderly man with complete disrespect. Are you sure it's a misunderstanding?" Before the exchange could continue, The receptionist stepped out, adjusting his suit as if trying to reassert his authority. He glanced at the couple, recognizing them as important guests, and quickly altered his demeanor. Good evening, sir and madam. Please excuse any inconvenience. We're merely dealing with a situation." "What kind of situation?" the man pressed, his tone sharp. "Because from here it seems you're acting entirely inappropriately toward a guest." The receptionist hesitated. "This gentleman claimed to have a reservation, but we found nothing. To avoid further issues, we thought it best to escort him out." "Escort him?" The woman let out a bitter laugh. "You dragged him out as if he were a criminal." Samuel remained silent, watching the exchange unfold. He did not need defenders. He needed humanity. A small group of staff had gathered at the entrance, watching with wide eyes. A murmur spread through the crowd. The tension in the air was almost palpable. The receptionist tried to end the conversation, offering to discuss the matter privately. But before he could insist, a new voice cut through the tension. "Stop this! Now!" Everyone turned to see a woman in her 50s, with a professional and serious expression, hurrying toward them. She wore an elegant blazer and slacks, her badge marking her as a high-ranking executive in the hotel chain. The manager, known to nearly everyone present, stopped next to Samuel, breathless. "Release him immediately," she demanded. The guards hesitated, though they had already let go. "And you, Martin," she fixed the receptionist with a piercing glare, "you've made a grave mistake." "Ma'am, he claimed to have a reservation, but we had no record," Martin stammered, visibly shaken. The manager took a deep breath, struggling to contain her emotions. "Did you even bother to ask who he was before treating him this way?" She addressed everyone around, her voice sharp. "This man is Samuel Correa, the true owner of this hotel and the entire chain." The silence was deafening. Martin turned pale, and other staff members were frozen in disbelief. Samuel stood quietly, watching every reaction. He had anticipated this moment of revelation, but it brought him no satisfaction, only a heavy weight and the painful reminder of a society that still insisted on judging him. The manager turned to Samuel, visibly shaken. "Sir, please accept my deepest apologies. This is unacceptable." Samuel met her gaze with tired eyes. "I don't need apologies. I need you all to learn. Everyone here needs to learn." His voice was calm, but it carried an unyielding force that commanded attention. The silence that followed the revelation was suffocating. All eyes were on Samuel, the elderly man now recognized as the true owner of the hotel. The expressions of shock varied. Some were open-mouthed, others showed shame, and a few were tinged with fear. Martin, the receptionist, stood frozen, his face drained of color and incapable of meeting anyone's gaze. The manager remained by Samuel's side, as if offering a shield or a gesture of solidarity, but he subtly stepped away. Samuel did not seek protection. He wanted to be seen for who he was, nothing more, nothing less. "Have you ever been knocked down so many times only to keep getting back up?" he began, his voice deep and measured. "To many of you, this moment is a shock. To me, it's a cycle that repeats." He turned to the security guards who had dragged him outside. Now, they shifted uncomfortably, unable to hold his gaze. The sound of footsteps echoed across the polished floor as more onlookers gathered. The contrast with the lavish setting could not have been more stark. A man stripped of dignity, revealed as someone far beyond their limited expectations. "I built this hotel to be a symbol of hospitality and dignity. Today, I see that we've failed. I have failed." Samuel's eyes swept across the assembled staff. His words carried the weight of disappointment and determination, as if he spoke not only to them, but to himself. The receptionist tried to utter something, perhaps an excuse or a plea for forgiveness. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't know because you chose not to see, Samuel replied without anger but with undeniable resolve. You looked at me and decided who I was without knowing anything about me. That is what hurts the most. A murmur rippled through the gathered staff, as if each person were confronting their own complicity in prejudice. Samuel walked slowly through the lobby, as if the moment itself were a tribunal, judging everyone present, including himself. He stopped at a large window, looking out at the city lights that sparkled beyond the glass. How many times in my life have I had to prove my worth? He asked, not to anyone in particular, but to the room itself. How many times have I been judged for the color of my skin, rather than my experience, my history, or who I am as a person? The manager tried to interject, perhaps to diffuse the gravity of the moment. Please, Samuel, allow me to... He silenced her with a calm look. You are not responsible for everything, but we are all responsible for something. Everyone who turned away, who laughed, who judged without knowing, shares a piece of this. Many staff members lowered their eyes, shame evident on their faces. A heavy silence lingered once more. Samuel turned back toward the lobby entrance, his voice strong and unwavering. This isn't just about me. It's about how we choose to see others, how we label them without understanding. A group of guests began to disperse, some visibly uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. Others stayed, unable to turn away from a moment so profoundly revealing. The scene etched itself into their memories. Samuel walked back into the hotel, each step a statement of resilience against the weight of the experience. His footsteps echoed in the grand lobby, leaving behind a space filled with raw truth and the promise of change. The tension in the hotel lingered long after Samuel walked through the lobby. Everyone who had witnessed the scene seemed deeply affected, but the reality of the situation began to sink in. The public humiliation had to be met with visible action. Samuel proceeded to the meeting room, where, ironically, the business event he had been invited to was still set to take place. Inside the room, high-ranking executives and business partners waited, unaware of the commotion that had gripped the hotel. The manager followed Samuel closely, trying to maintain composure. She understood that the meticulously planned event could now be overshadowed by what had just transpired, but this reality paled in comparison to addressing the incident's consequences. Samuel motioned for silence as he entered. The room hushed. He turned to face the assembled guests, but most importantly, the group of staff brought into the room. Martin, the receptionist, was among them, his head bowed in shame. "We're here today to discuss business, correct?" Samuel began, his voice calm but resolute. "Yet before we discuss any transactions or numbers, there is something far more important that must be addressed: respect for one another." He paused, letting his words sink in. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if hoping to escape the palpable tension. Others watched intently, waiting for the next revelation. Throughout my life, I have always believed that true success is not measured by what you accumulate, but by the impact you have on people. Today, I was treated as though I did not belong here. This is a symptom of something far deeper. The manager stood beside him, prepared to offer support, but Samuel raised his hand slightly, signaling he was not done. "I do not seek vengeance or punishment, though many might think it would be justified. What I seek is learning. Because it means nothing to have the finest hotels if we fail at the most basic level, our humanity." Samuel's gaze fell on Martin, who could not meet his eyes. "What did you see when you looked at me? What was the first thing that crossed your mind? I want everyone here to reflect on that." His voice trembled slightly, filled with the weight of years of memories and emotions. People are so much more than appearances, skin color, or backgrounds. A low murmur rippled through the room. Some employees shed tears, while others appeared lost in thought. Martin finally summoned the courage to speak, his voice low and unsteady. I am deeply ashamed. There is no excuse for what I did. There are no excuses, Samuel agreed, his tone firm. But there are choices. You can choose to be a different person from now on. He took a deep breath. And that change begins now. The manager, visibly moved, addressed the room. This cannot be just a passing reflection. We have a great deal of work to do to ensure that our culture is different, that everyone feels respected and valued. Samuel then announced, in the coming days, we will begin mandatory training sessions for every employee at every level. This is not optional. We will rethink our values, how we treat each other, and more importantly, ensure that no guest, employee, or partner endures what I did today. The announcement sent a wave of murmurs through the crowd, but it was mostly well received. Even those uncomfortable with change recognized that there was no alternative. The hotel's very essence had to be restored. After his speech, people began to disperse slowly. The business event would continue, but now in a context infused with newfound awareness. Samuel left the room, feeling the weight of what had just occurred, but determined to see the transformation through. He knew the process would be long, but at least now, everyone was listening. The hall was filled to capacity. Every employee, from the highest-ranking executives to the maintenance and housekeeping staff, had been summoned for an extraordinary meeting. The air was thick with anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. Nobody knew exactly what to expect, but everyone understood that the situation was grave. Samuel, now fully recognized as the owner of the hotel, walked to the center of the makeshift stage. Every eye in the room was on him. He stood in silence for a few moments, scanning each face in the crowd. Many avoided his gaze. Others were nearly paralyzed by tension. Finally, Samuel spoke, his voice carrying the weight of experience and the force of someone who had endured much to be standing there. When I was a child, he began, I was kicked out of a restaurant because I wasn't welcome. My mother held my hand and led me out while I cried. I made a promise to myself that no one would ever tell me where I belonged. I built this hotel to be a place where everyone is welcome, but today I was thrown out of my own dream. A murmur spread among the crowd. His words landed with a heavy impact. He continued, this isn't just about me. It's about every person who, every day, is judged before they even have a chance to speak. About each of you who has ever felt small, humiliated, or underestimated. He paused, letting his words settle in. I want to share something with you. I grew up in a small village where my family barely had enough to eat. Everything I achieved came through hard work, facing closed doors and glares that said I wasn't good enough. I worked to change that. Along the way, I learned that a person's worth isn't measured by their clothes, the color of their skin, or their job title. Some staff members began to cry, while others reflected deeply. Samuel continued, many of you work here every day, but maybe you've never stopped to wonder about the story of the person standing next to you. Perhaps you judge your colleagues without really knowing them. That's how prejudice starts, and that's how it continues to grow. Samuel turned his gaze directly to Martin, the receptionist, not with anger, but with deep disappointment. Martin, you treated me as though I had no value, but you aren't the only one. Everyone who laughed, who looked away, or who judged silently, shares responsibility in this. He took another step forward, making eye contact with as many people as he could. Dignity, respect, humanity. These are words we hear often, but too frequently forget to practice. That ends here. If we want to be better, if we want this hotel to be a symbol of welcome and respect, Then we need to start now. A heavy, contemplative silence fell over the hall. The message was unmistakable. No one was exempt from responsibility, but everyone had the chance to change. Samuel's voice softened but remained strong. I don't expect perfection from anyone, but I do expect each of you to make a real effort. Every small gesture counts. You have a choice to be better, and I will be watching. The hotel manager, who had been standing next to him, spoke next. She outlined the concrete steps they would take to improve the hotel's culture: mandatory training sessions, ongoing assessments, and a renewed commitment to treating everyone with respect and dignity. After the meeting, many staff members approached Samuel, some tearfully apologizing or thanking him for his courage in sharing his story. Others were visibly shaken, but determined to change. Samuel received them with empathy, but his firm resolve made it clear that moving forward would require genuine effort. The gathering ended with a mix of emotions: hope, regret, and above all, a commitment to do better. Samuel left the hall knowing that the path ahead would be challenging, but he felt reassured that a genuine change had begun. In the days that followed Samuel's powerful speech, the hotel began a transformation process. His promise of change was not just empty rhetoric. Training sessions became a daily occurrence, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and respect. Employees were encouraged to share their own stories, their struggles with prejudice and discrimination, creating a newfound atmosphere of empathy and understanding. Samuel often attended these sessions. His silent but commanding presence served as a constant reminder of why these lessons mattered. He listened attentively, intervened when necessary, and inspired through his words, pushing everyone to confront their biases and behaviors. Martin, the receptionist who had mistreated him, was among the first to be called in for a private session. Seated across from Samuel, he appeared much younger, almost fragile without the mask of arrogance he had worn before. "Why did you treat me that way?" Samuel asked directly, his tone firm but not accusatory. Martin hesitated, words caught in his throat. I grew up in a place where we were always taught to distrust people who were different," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. "But that doesn't excuse what I did. I was cruel and blind. I failed to see you as a person." Silence hung between them, heavy and charged. Samuel leaned forward slightly. "You don't need to justify yourself to me. You need to do better, not for me, but for yourself." With those words, he gave Martin a chance to reflect deeply on his actions. From that day on, Martin committed himself to change. He joined the training sessions wholeheartedly, not just as an employee, but as someone seeking redemption. He faced scorn from some co-workers initially, but others offered support. His journey would not be easy, but he was determined to see it through. Other employees also engaged with the process. Stories of small changes in behavior began to emerge. Some started greeting colleagues they had previously ignored. Others volunteered for community outreach projects initiated by the hotel. The culture of the place was slowly, but perceptibly, shifting. Meanwhile, Samuel continued to lead by example. In a meeting with the hotel's executives, he made it clear that discrimination in any form would not be tolerated. "You have the power to shape the culture here," he said. "Make it reflect the values we want to see in society." And he knew cultural change would only succeed if it was embraced from the top down. But the road was not without challenges. Resistance persisted. Some employees believed the new policies were excessive, while others felt uncomfortable exposing their own flaws and biases. Samuel knew this battle would not be won overnight. It was a journey he was committed to seeing through. One afternoon, as he walked through the hotel, Samuel noticed a group of employees in animated conversation about their own stories of overcoming prejudice. One of them, a young man named Roberto, shared that he had faced racism in previous jobs and feared it would happen again when he saw what had happened to Samuel. "But now, seeing how you handled it, I feel like I have a chance to be respected here." "To be myself," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "This place will only be a home for everyone if each of us commits to building it that way. Change starts with you, with me, with every one of us." Days passed, and the changes began to reflect in the way guests were treated. Many noticed a new spirit among the staff, a genuine sense of hospitality and a willingness to listen and assist. The hotel began to stand out not only for its luxury, but for the respect and inclusivity it embodied. At one point, Samuel observed from afar as Martin, now visibly transformed, patiently helped an elderly guest with genuine kindness and empathy. It was a small gesture, but it represented a great shift. Samuel knew there was still much work to be done, but he felt reassured that they were on the right path. The hotel, which for so many years symbolized Samuel's success, was now becoming something even more meaningful, a beacon of hope, respect, and transformation. The changes taking place were not limited to training sessions and speeches. They began to manifest in the daily interactions of employees and in the experiences of the guests. In the aftermath of Samuel's revelation, the story spread across the city, quickly gaining traction on social media and in the news. Many were inspired by his courage and his ability to turn pain into a force for change. Some praised him as a model of leadership, while others remained skeptical, waiting to see if the changes would truly last. But Samuel paid little attention to public opinion. His priority was ensuring that the legacy he had built aligned with his values. One of the most significant moments was a ceremony organized internally by the hotel staff. Employees gathered to honor Samuel, acknowledging not just his role as their leader, but as a mentor and a catalyst for change. The manager, who had witnessed the incident with the security guards, stood on stage and spoke with deep emotion. "This experience forced us to confront our own shortcomings and aspirations," she said. "We are still learning, Samuel, but we are committed to doing better." In his brief but poignant response, Samuel said, "Real change does not happen overnight. It begins with small actions and grows over time. You all have the opportunity to be the change we want to see in this place. Not out of obligation, but because we believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." After the ceremony, Samuel walked through the hotel, taking in every detail and every face. He felt that he had left a mark, not just in bricks and mortar, but in a message that would resonate for generations to come. As he prepared to leave the hotel, Samuel encountered Martin once more. The young receptionist now looked at him with genuine respect, something that had been missing before. "Mr. Samuel, thank you. You taught me to see beyond what I thought I knew and to be a better person." Samuel offered a small smile. "I hope you keep learning, Martin. It's not about being perfect, but about striving to be better." Outside, the sky was painted in warm hues as the sun began to set. Samuel took one last look at the hotel. He felt that he was leaving behind more than a business. He was leaving a legacy, a lesson that could echo long after he was gone. As he walked to his car, several employees followed, some waving and others silently expressing their gratitude. Samuel climbed into the vehicle, glanced back at the grand facade one final time, and drove away, knowing that despite the scars of that day, seeds of change had been sown. His journey was far from over, but he felt hope, not because of the magnitude of what he had accomplished, but because of the promise of what could still be built.